Hello, so I've just made a video on Aristotle and the four causes and a few of little bits of philosophy in there. So now I'm basically going to go through this question sheet. It's 20 questions on Boethius, and it's basically to do with the attributes of God. So I'm going to read off the question. I've got the answers on the back in case I forget any of them, but I'll just try and talk through as much of it as possible because this is a possibility and a probability for the exam tomorrow. Because there's only two A2 topics of philosophy, and both of those are most likely going to come up on the real exam, so I suspect that my teacher is going to put them on the trial exam. It's possible. Okay, what was Boethius's book called? Boethius's book was called The Consolation of Philosophy, and he wrote it when he was in prison, and he got in trouble for, I believe it was treason. He was falsely accused of treason or something like that, and he ended up getting executed at some point, or later on. And the book is basically what it says. The next question is, it is written in the form of a dialogue. Anyway, it's written in the form of a dialogue between Boethius and himself, but instead of just arguing with himself, he almost creates up a character called Lady Philosophy, and so he argues with Lady Philosophy in the book about God. And I think the question that he asks is God right to reward and punish? I think that's right anyway. So since knowledge is based... Alright, okay. So here's a quote from Boethius, and he basically said that since knowledge is based not on the thing known, but on the nature of the knower. So this means that the nature of the individual who's perceiving the world or is knowing something it influences the thing being known. So if you put a dog and a human in the same experience, the dog is going to know that experience differently to a human. The dog might pick up more on discrete sense, whereas the human might have better vision. I don't know, but... Okay, so Hugh Campbell uses an example of Mozart. So it's basically the idea of an orchestra. And Mozart was an extremely profound musician. I guess you could call him a savant or something. And he could, out of a whole orchestra, hear if one single violin was out of tune, even just slightly, whereas the normal person wouldn't be able to pick that up. So Mozart has a very different experience to music than a regular person, and I think he makes a comparison between Mozart and the deaf person. So when the deaf person who doesn't have any hearing is in the orchestra listening to the music, experiencing the music, they're not experiencing and knowing the music in the same way that Mozart knows the music, because the nature of the knower is in a different state. One person has extremely superior hearing, I would say, and the other person has extremely poor hearing. Yet they're listening to the same thing. It's the same set of sound waves, but they're being interpreted differently. So that's sort of, it's a way of getting us to think about what knowledge actually is and how knowledge differs from different beings and different species. So if we can imagine that two people can have a completely different experience of the same objective reality, then we have to question, well, can we really understand how God is perceiving reality, and should we be so quick to jump to any sort of conclusion? Because I think it would be easy to think, oh, God perceives things the way we do, but that's probably not the case. And obviously I'm speaking as if God does exist, and I don't know exactly if God does exist, and I don't know how God exists, but I'll leave that aside for now. Boethius starts by defining God as eternal. He defines eternity as I think I've got these words the right way around. The simultaneous possession of boundless life. Or is it the boundless possession of simultaneous life? No, the simultaneous possession of boundless life. So this is basically saying that So God exists. Eternity is essentially God existing outside of time, and it says the simultaneous possession of boundless life. So God perceives everything in sort of a simultaneous present. So whereas when we're having our human experience here on Earth, we might perceive there to be a future, and that is what has yet to happen within our experience. And we perceive there to be a past which has already occurred in our experience. Whereas God, he'll see the past, present, and future all as sort of a simultaneous now. And this makes me think that is life then predetermined? If God has already seen all of this already happening, then supposedly he's caused it to happen, he's laid it out in this way, then are things not determined, and then does that not take away our free will? But Boethius says that we still have free will, and we still have the ability to make choices. And again, it goes back to the way that God perceives time, and God perceives space, and God perceives reality. We don't necessarily know that. We don't know what it's like to perceive an eternal now. Like, that's completely out of the domain of our human minds, outside of our perspective. Yeah, okay, so he compares with temporal, in-time things we have not yet arrived at tomorrow, and we no longer live in yesterday. So that's pretty much what I was just saying about how we perceive the future as in to be, and the past as in gone, or already occurred. Okay, so Boethius concludes that divine foreknowledge is not knowledge of things in the future, but knowledge of an unchanging present. I normally, there's like gaps in there, and I normally put an eternal present, which apparently is right, but it's unchanging. Yeah, so God doesn't God doesn't necessarily perceive the future as we know it. God perceives the future as a simultaneous occurrence with what we perceive as the past and the present. So it's all one thing, which is, I don't even want to try and conceptualize that, because I know it's going to be impossible. Okay, and perhaps we could use that as a criticism. Like, how does Boethius know how God perceives reality? Like, I don't know. It seems a little bit speculative. So God sees things as present, how we might regard them as future and past, which is what I've already talked about as well. How does God know all things? Word beginning with I, and this word is intuitively. God knows all things because he is intuitive. I don't know. That's just that. Explain simple necessity. Okay, so simple necessity is essentially something which happens due to its nature, or as a result of its nature. For example, or it's not subject to human choice. For example, the sun shining on a sunny day. It's just the sun shines because of the nature of the sun shining. That's what the sun does. It's not like I wake up in the morning, I might wish for the sun to be shining, but my wish doesn't control whether the sun is going to shine or not. That just happens as a result of its nature, and whether or not the clouds are going to be covering it, I have no control over that whatsoever as a conscious free human being. And then there's conditional necessity, and conditional necessity is essentially a necessity. It's necessary that God sees it because a human has chosen to do it. It's subject to human choice, or I don't know about animal choice, because I don't think Boethius actually talks about that. But an example of this is a man walking. So a man walking on a sunny day, the sun is the simple necessity, the man walking is conditional necessity, because the man could easily choose to stop walking. But the sun couldn't just choose to stop shining. It does it as a result of its nature. Okay, and there was actually, I can't remember exactly, but I think this is essentially the example I'm talking about. But this also captures the idea of God seeing an eternal present. So if you think of a hill, and then you've got the sun in the sky, and you've got the man walking beneath the hill, so he's following his path. The man can only see his exactly where he's around them in his eye line. The man on top of the hill, who is essentially representative of God, so I guess you might as well just call him God. God, who's on top of the hill, can see behind the man, in front of the man, and where the man currently is. So that's how God perceives time. But obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that, because God would see it all occurring at the same time, and everything that's occurring on Earth at the same time, which is extremely hard to conceptualize, and exactly why I don't want to try and do it. And then there's the sun shining, obviously, which is just doing it as a result of nature. So it's necessary that God sees the sun shining because it is shining as a result of its nature. It's necessary that God sees the man walking because he is walking as a result of his choice, as a result of his free choice. Yeah. But he could easily stop, and that is also what God would see, because, yeah. Right, so the divine mind looks down on all things, and without... I think it is, and without... So the divine mind looks down on all things, and without intervening and judging the nature of the things it is viewing. Or is it changing... Without intervening and changing the nature of things it is viewing, sees things as eternally present. So God is essentially, he can see all that is happening, but he doesn't ever intervene. So he knows when I don't even want to say when something is going to happen. He knew that genocide was going to happen. He knew that all of these different things in the world that have occurred and that have been bad have happened, and this seems a little bit incompatible with the problem of evil. But then Boethius says that we have free will, and it doesn't make much sense to me that you can have free will yet God's seen it all already happen. And I understand that God's seeing this outside of the realm of the human perspective. Like, we don't necessarily know how God experiences the world, just like we don't necessarily know how a dog experiences the world. But it's still different to that, because we don't even know if this God exists, because a dog is physical, so we can sort of relate to how a dog perceives the world, at least a little bit. But with God, we can barely do that at all. But if it is true that that we are made in God's image, then perhaps we have some sort of idea of how God perceives things. And I guess we could link to Aquinas and the way of analogy, or analogical language. And when we talk about God, God's attributes, we know that we have a slight understanding of what it means for God to be good, but we don't know wholly what it means for God to be good, because we can only understand that to a very small degree because of our limited capacity as human beings. So perhaps that's what it's like in this situation. We perceive reality in a similar way to God, but nowhere near to the extent. But then again, we don't know the extent to which God perceives reality in comparison to our own. So God could perceive, according to this, God perceives the past, present and future all as an eternal now. So perhaps in the same way that I'm perceiving this present moment, which is constantly changing, I don't know, like what even is a moment? Because I'm sat in this room right now and I'm perceiving the world around me, and it's just how it is. Like, I'm sat in the room, I can see the ceiling, I can see a TV over there, I can see a wardrobe, I can see a set of drawers. So I guess God would experience the whole of time like this. So he's outside of time and he can see the past, present and future, just in the same way that I can sit in this room in the present and perceive all of the different things going on around me. But obviously I can't conceptualize time in the same way that God can. So I can't, because I'm existing within time, whereas God exists outside of time, and I can't take myself outside of time because space and time are contingent. They exist with each other, and they're also a product of the universe. So it makes sense to say that God exists eternally, because for God to exist with inside time, then that would, for inside of time and space, and God created the universe, and time and space were formulated at the same time with the universe. Then how could a being that's within a universe that hasn't been created yet, create time and space? But then, if this God is omnipotent, does he have the power to enter into time and space? But then again, if he did exist within time and space, then he must be changing, because time and space is constantly changing, and we can't escape that. I think it's a difficult idea. A difficult thing to grasp again. I did have another idea there, but I got a little bit off track with my thought pattern. I was thinking about God as being eternal and existing outside of time and space, whereas we're existing inside of time and space. So we can only experience reality from within time and space, and time and space is relative to the universe. It is relative to the place that we are. Like time, for example, it goes different, but I think it's the case that time actually moves slower in space than it does on Earth. So if an astronaut's sent out into space and comes back, the astronaut will have perceived a short amount of time to have gone by, when on Earth everyone's been aging. And this is an extremely difficult thing to grasp, but it just shows like whoa, the nature of the universe is actually insane. And I think is there space everywhere? Is there time everywhere? Is there some sort of matter everywhere? Or is there actually nothing at some places in the universe, but that nothing, it would just be a void? And could anything exist within a void? No, it couldn't. I think if you think of a vacuum, I've seen these vacuum chambers. I'm getting really off topic here, but it's really interesting, and the video is going to cut out. Okay, I want to talk about this a little bit. I've seen vacuum chambers where they suck the air out of these chambers, and it's really unethical, and I'm vegan, so I don't support it in any way. But they'll put actually, I'll give a different example. They put marshmallows in the tank, and what happens is when they suck the air out of the thing, the marshmallow will just expand, and because the marshmallow. No, does it expand or does it contract? Okay, I think it expands because the air in the vacuum chamber is interacting with the marshmallow. So it's the air creates pressure on it almost, and it keeps the marshmallow in shape. But when you remove the air, the marshmallow grows, and then when you suck the air back in, it'll shrivel back up because the air is pushing it back in. And I can't remember exactly where I was going with that, but oh yeah, it's can nothing exist? And I don't know. I don't even think scientists can answer that question. I know that was it Lawrence Krauss? He wrote a book called How Something Can Come From Nothing, or something along those lines. How Something Came From Nothing. And I haven't read it, but I've heard I've watched reviews, and I've watched him lecture about it on YouTube, and he I don't feel like he gets to the root of the problem. He says that particles pop out of thin air, but it's like, well, okay, are those particles really popping out of thin air, or are they popping out of something that we're just not able to measure or see? Okay, right, I'm going to carry on with this anyway, because I'm getting really off track. With interesting stuff though. It is interesting stuff. I love science. Why did I have to fuck up my GCSEs? I really don't know. Okay. What does God's foreknowledge not impose on things? Necessity. That's it. God's foreknowledge does not impose necessity on things. So God sees the future and the past, but it somehow doesn't impose necessity. So things aren't necessarily determined. And we do have free will. Is God right to reward or punish according to Boethius? Boethius says that God is right to reward and punish because we have free will. We choose our actions. But it's quite interesting because Boethius is in jail and he's about to be executed for being falsely accused of treason. So, like, is that in a just world? Like, it sounds like he's being punished there, unless he's got some sort of belief in an afterlife that things are all going to be okay when he's dead and he's going to go to like heaven and reach the beatific vision or whatever. I really don't know. Is God right to identify an advantage of Boethius's thinking? So an advantage of Boethius's thinking, I guess, could be, I feel like I'm just going to read these off the back because I've been going through as we go along, but I've forgot. So, okay, I'll skip 17 and 18 because I'll just go to them in a minute and I'll read those ones off the back, just so I can get them through quickly, get them down quickly because I've only got like 3 minutes. I haven't got time to think my way through that right now. Hiccup. What label could be given to could we give to Anselm's theory of time? So Anselm's theory of time we call Anselm's fourth dimensionalist approach, and this is the idea that objects exist both in time and in space. So I've already done enough thinking of time and space, and I don't really have any time left to do much more on that. I've got 3 minutes of recording left. Okay, so complete this quote. How God is in... can't remember. I think how God is in time and... How God is in time and in no time and space. Wait, I can't remember the quote. It was how God is in all and in no place and time. Right, so advantages of Boethius's theory is that it is consistent, sophisticated, fits with the cosmological argument and God as a creator. It takes human freedom seriously. It gives a different solution to the problem of evil. World has to be the way it is. Okay. Well, I guess it's saying that the world has to be the way it is because this is the most perfect world that God could possibly make out of matter. And we can link to Plato here and say, well, matter is inherently flawed, therefore even a perfect being such as God could not create a perfect creation out of matter because matter's just flawed. That's that. So then there's obviously going to be problems with suffering and evil and bad things happening, and I think that's a good explanation for that. So this is literally the best God could do, but is that not a bit weak? Because surely we could avoid mass genocide and natural disasters and all of these things which absolutely tear people's lives apart and destroy people, and even like things like drug abuse and just personal trauma and all these things. They're just so like bad and they just seem completely unjust, yet they're constantly happening. But anyway, I won't get into problem with evil because I've got videos like that on my channel and I quite enjoy that subject. Okay, so disadvantage, it makes God too remote, so it's like a deistic God perhaps. God can't intervene. What's the point of prayer? It is deist, too philosophical and not sufficiently Christian. So I guess the Christian God is perceived as this all-loving, all-powerful being who interacts with us, who answers our prayers, and who is almost like a friend to us, whereas this perception of God is a God who doesn't intervene in the world. He is separate from it. He exists outside of time and space completely, and he doesn't interact with us. And it's like, well, okay, well, what's the point in praying to him? What's the point in communicating to this God? What's the point in worshipping him if he's just going to be, if he's just created this world, he can see it all happening in an eternal now, but he's not going to do anything about it. I don't know, it just seems a little bit, it makes him a little bit distant, and yeah, and also I guess he has no proof, and that's the last one. So thank you for watching anyway. I've got 2 seconds left. Right.